morning. Please be seated. This is the time set for oral argument in DBT Yuma versus Yuma County, 1CA CV 130645. Counsel, you're probably aware of this court's practice. We have read the briefs and discussed the case before coming into oral argument this morning, so you can bear that in mind. As with all of our oral arguments, we are being videotaped, and the video will be published online, so if you'd announce your name and that of the client we represent when you approach the podium, that would be helpful. Each side has 20 minutes, and the appellant may reserve as much time as you wish for rebuttal, but you're responsible for watching your own clock, and when the clock says 0, that's when we're done. So with that, we may proceed.
Your Honor, my name is Darrell Williams, and I represent the appellates in this case. My clients were tenants at the Yuma County Airport and were evicted. We sued the Yuma County Airport Authority, and we also sued Yuma County.
But first you sued the authority and effectively disclaimed that the county had any kind of liability, didn't you?
Well, I was not the lawyer down below when that happened. But initially, of course,
it's always a good position to
take.
Yeah,
it's always the best position to take. It wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. But yes, indeed, they were. Although they were served with the appropriate claims notices, they only served the airport authority as the signator of the lease.
You're saying the county was served with a 12A21 demand.
That's correct.
But any liability in Yuma was denied by the plaintiff.
Denied by the plaintiff? I don't think so, Your Honor, because there was an amendment that says that they are responsible for these actions.
They were brought in subsequently, is my
Yes,
point.
brought in subsequently.
All right.
And so there's no admission there that I think is binding with respect. What happened in this case involves really whether or not the airport authority is the agent and instrumentality of the county. The airport authority was incorporated on December 31, 1965. That's when its articles were recorded. The agreement with the county, which was not denominated a lease, the agreement to run the airport was signed on January 17, 1966, just 17 days later. And this agreement, in essence, empowers the airport authority, delegates to the airport authority the operation of the airport. And it was clearly done according to the agreement between the airport authority and the county under the auspices of the statute, which we claim makes the county responsible for the actions of its instrumentality. I'm not sure what to do with this case in the face of the decisions that have come out of Division 2 and the Arizona Supreme Court that hold at least the basis of these decisions are that the county or the airport authority, Tucson Airport Authority, is the agent and instrumentality of its sponsor, the city of Tucson. And I don't know quite how to get around these decisions, which are the Hertz case in 1956 by the Arizona Supreme Court, the Loeffler case in 1984, and later on, although it's more tangential, the Thompson versus Tucson Airport Authority case in 1989. And I get wandering around in the briefs on such things as hendiatus and whether or not body politic and corporate means something other than a corporation as a corporate, an incorporated corporation which a parent doesn't have liability for. I just don't think any of that comes into play, because what we have here is a statute that makes this type of entity, an entity that was specifically formed for the purpose of running an airport. That's what the Articles of Incorporation say. And then 17 days later, they take over the operation of this airport for the county. And so
What benefit does the county get from the operation of the airport?
what they get is the services of a specialized group of people to run its airport.
So there's a public benefit to having an airport there.
Yes.
But the county has no say in how the airport is run.
I disagree with that. They take no say in how the airport is run.
Well, legally, how would they exercise say?
They have the right under this agreement that they made with the airport authority to do improvements and to control the environment.
But there's no argument, counsel, that YCAA owns the property that is the airport, is there?
None at all. None at all.
So really what you're saying is that Yuma owns the airport, Yuma has the right to improve and develop the airport, and we certainly know what that means for tourism in small
Sure.
towns and things like that, but that the operation of the airport resides in the contracted for services of YCAA, is that
Yes,
not
they have delegated that to this body politic and instrumentality, body politic corporate, its instrumentality to run the airport.
So if the agent, as you call it, decides that it wants to make changes in airport services or snacks or some aspect of airport operations that the County Board of Supervisors doesn't like, what can the County Board of Supervisors do?
Well, I think that they are delimited by the document that they have. They can't go beyond the scope of providing public
They
services.
can't run the airport.
Beg your pardon?
They can't run the airport.
The
because
county-
They don't. The county doesn't own the airport. It doesn't own the entity that does own the airport. Correct?
Well, I may have misheard you. The county does own the airport.
They own the land.
They own the land,
Dirt.
But
all
They
the
own the dirt.
improvements.
But not the possessory interest that allows the airport to operate.
Well, they don't have, they do have a possessory interest. They can go on it, they can inspect it, they can improve it, they can make changes to it. So this is not in a classic sense a lease where it partakes of something like a conveyance where they own it for a term. That is not what is there. And so the lease is a formality to comply with the statutes, $1 a year, and you run it for us. If they do something contrary to policy that's not good in the best interest of the public policy, they can terminate this lease.
So that $1 a lease year is, I believe, how the city of Phoenix operates a lot of its projects, the zoo and the botanical gardens and things like that. And if somebody gets eaten by a lion at the Phoenix Zoo, is the city of Phoenix liable?
I don't know the answer to that because I'm not familiar with either the statutes that implement that nor the particular documents in force between whomever it is, who I don't know, that's operating the zoo. All I know here is that we have a statute that expressly says the airport authority is the agent and instrumentality.
It also says they have policing powers, correct?
Yes, well, it says they may exercise police powers.
It says they have taxing authority.
Yes, it does.
Doesn't sound like a department or an agency of Yuma County to me. The Y's, I knew I was going to goof that up today, of Yuma County today. That doesn't sound like something that's typical of a department of the county, that they would have independent taxing and policing authority.
Well, their policing authority is not carte blanche. They can have police officers, and then the county is exempted from any liability for those police officers, and presumably they have to be licensed by some sort of police authority in the state.
Okay, so the distinction you're drawing is that they can be Yuma police officers, Yuma County sheriff's deputies, I assume?
Well, I don't think that that's what they have in mind when they give them the right to have police officers.
I thought that's what you said. I thought you said that they do have them, but they're...
Well, I think to have a police officer, it's a unique sort of thing you got to comply with to have a policeman.
And the agreement is that Yuma isn't liable for anything those officers do in the service of YCAA while they're there.
No, that's not in the agreement.
That's what I thought you said as well.
That's in the statute.
Okay.
The statute exempts them
There
from
you go.
liability
Okay,
for
so
that.
the bottom line is for any actions under their policing authority, Yuma's not liable
Under the statute.
under the statute. And under the taxing authority, Yuma doesn't have any say in imposing or reducing out the tax that had been entered, correct?
I think probably not.
Okay.
I'm not sure that pertains and is relevant to the rather unique structure and nature of this relationship between the airport authority, which runs the airport for the county.
Right.
That's what's happening here. And when you stand back and look at the 30,000-foot view, you're going, wait a minute. This is someone the county has assigned, delegated to run the airport for whom? Well, for the county, because it's the county's airport, and for public purposes.
But they haven't delegated or assigned. They've contracted with another agency to, under the particular statute, to provide a certain benefit to the county, correct?
Well, the benefit to the county is it doesn't have to mess with running the airport.
Why doesn't that include not being sued?
Well, I don't think so under the statute. Moreover,
So you give up. They're agreeing to everything. I mean, have somebody else take it all over, but you're still liable.
Responsibility without control.
well, I think they can exercise control if they want. They had the option to exercise any control they wanted. And so you cannot say that because they didn't do something they could have in their agreement, that therefore they're not responsible.
That's inconsistent with the position that plaintiff took in the Superior Court when it said the members of the board are not answerable to anyone else.
Well, they say they're not answerable,
Well, but
and that's what their testimony is.
That's what your client said. I mean, the client acknowledged that.
Well, we acknowledge that they're not answering to anybody. But as a matter of law, they are answerable.
But you put it this way, YCAA is an independent public agency that is not really answerable to anyone.
Yeah, not really, because they, as a de facto matter, do not. And we have an agreement, for example, that obligates them to insure the county, obligates the county to pay for that insurance, to protect the county, and it's just not a normal kind of lease relationship. And the county could have leased it to somebody and had no liability. They could have leased it. They could have sold it. They couldn't sell it because of the patent in this case. But they could have leased it to a for-profit corporation and not be drawn in under the terms of the statute in this case.
So what is your position that the purpose of the statute is? There are three options they could have had, right? They could have run the airport themselves.
Yes.
They could have invited state or federal intervention, if you will, to do certain things and make that airport functional. Or they could proceed under this statute.
That's incorrect with respect. They could run it themselves.
Right.
They could just lease it to somebody who's a for-profit corporation, and now they're not involved in the airport at all. Or they can choose this middle ground, which is the nonprofit, which works under this statute.
So what's the difference between running it themselves or running it under the nonprofit if they're going to be liable regardless of what the outcome is?
Well, the difference is if you have no specialty in running an airport and you don't want to have your own separate bureaucracy to do that, you have somebody who understands airports run them, which is very typical in the United States.
As opposed to going out and finding the people capable and knowledgeable of doing that and employing them to run that airport for your benefit.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Counsel.
I have 6 minutes. I think I'll wait.
Very well. Thank you.
Well, Your Honor, my name is Bill Kirkus. I'm representing Appalachia, Yuma County. And I do want to begin by clarifying a few of the factual issues that council raised. He made scant reference to an amendment to the lease that appointed the airport authority as the county's agent. The document, it's actually a misstatement. The document he's talking about is actually an agreement with Yuma County and Yuma County Airport Authority regarding an auxiliary field that has nothing to do with Yuma County or the Yuma International Airport. It's a small field south of town. So there is no statement in the lease between Yuma and Yuma County Airport Authority that specifically appoints the airport authority as our agent to run the Yuma International Airport. The lease upon which the airport authority operates the airport is specifically and exclusively a creature of the statute. Judge Jones, you're exactly right. Yuma County had three options in order to have the operation of its airport. It could either do it itself, and the statute does provide it could have its own airport commission within the county auspices. That's a completely different statutory area in the airport code, separate and apart from the ability to lease it to either a for-profit or a not-for-profit corporation. The legislature very carefully crafted a scheme that provided entities throughout Arizona how their airports would be acquired, improved, maintained, and operated. And as you pointed out, Judge, the Yuma County chose to lease its airport to a nonprofit corporation comprised of local businessmen, local residents of Yuma County who had an interest in seeing that the airport was run for the benefit of the residents of Yuma County. That's precisely what the legislature intended by crafting this statute within the airport code. And it is a completely independent, privately formed corporation. Yuma County exerts and has no authority to exert any authority over the manner or method by which the airport authority improves the airport, operates any portion of the airport, hires any of its employees, fires any of its employees, and so forth. There simply is no power or authority to control any of those activities.
There is a provision requiring, I'm trying to think how the insurance provision works. There's some issue about who's insuring who and whose responsibility insurance is, correct?
I believe, Your Honor, as you can see from the record, I contacted the chief financial officer for the airport authority. They confirmed by affidavit that there, in no instance throughout the entire term of this lease, has Yuma County ever paid any liability insurance for and on behalf of the airport authority.
Is there a contractual responsibility for one party to pay the other party for insurance?
There is not. I believe it's simply an error in drafting in that lease where that provision existed. It did not exist in later versions or later amendments to the lease.
No one has called Yuma on that issue.
Nobody has called Yuma. And I confirmed with the chief financial officer of Yuma County. They checked their records, I believe, back 5 or 10 years, and there is no record of Yuma County ever paying liability premium on behalf of Yuma County Airport Authority for any of their operations on the airport.
Thank you.
Council, how are the board of directors, how are they selected? I mean, does the county have any influence over the selection of the board members?
Does not. They are.
It does.
The board itself, they select and elect the directors for the Yuma County Airport Authority. I think there is a reference.
What if and then there's provision in the bylaws if they all die, or I mean if they're all resigned, then how does a new board assembled? I mean, there's provisions in the bylaws for that of how a new board would be.
There is, but again, that's under the auspices of the Airport Authority. Yuma County Board of Supervisors do not get involved in the
So if there's a
selection.
mass resignation, nobody's going to come to the Yuma County Board of Supervisors and say, we need you to help get a new board started.
As we established in the record on appeal, Your Honor, Yuma County Board of Supervisors have no authority to alter, amend the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws. It would be up to some other individual to come in and organize a new board of directors for the Airport Authority.
You heard us ask questions about, the issue was raised about the development of that property. Yuma invests money in the property itself?
There has not been, to my knowledge, any direct monetary investment in improving Yuma County Airport by Yuma County.
But there is a provision in the agreement that if YCAA does any development, all developments and improvements inure to the benefit of Yuma County.
As required by the statute. That's not an element of the lease imposed by Yuma County upon the airport authority. That's an item imposed upon the parties by the legislature. If you're going to lease to a nonprofit corporation, the legislature, I believe it was 288423, mandated that the title to any improvement, any property, reverts back to the governmental entity at the termination of the lease.
For the sake of argument, obviously there's disagreement between the parties whether the airport authority is an agency and instrumentality, or it's like one. Assume, for sake of argument here, that it is an agency, an instrumentality. Does that change? Does that necessarily change and give liability to the county here?
Under the statutory scheme prepared and passed by the legislature, I do not believe it does.
Is YCAA a jural entity?
It is. It can sue and be sued on its own behalf. And that's one of the key items in the Locke versus City of Imperial case that court hinged its decision upon, and that the board of the airport authority in that case, the court noted, could sue and be sued on its own behalf, which that court relied upon heavily in its ultimate decision, that because the board was created and operated and acted independent of the City of Imperial in that case, it had its own discretion to operate the airport fully, could sue and be sued on its own behalf, could, I believe, similarly had the opportunity and the ability to raise taxes to finance the improvements. The court determined that it was, although it was a body politic, a public corporation under the statute, with regard to vicarious liability or imputing liability, it could not impute liability to the city.
And also, the airport authority in that case was also, if I understand correctly, also the legislature labeled them as an agency. Is that correct?
Yes.
They were not only a body politic, but also an agency?
Yes. Well, and the difference in that case was the initial board of directors was appointed by the governmental entity, but after their term ran, they were privately selected and privately elected.
It has the power to raise taxes, right?
Yes.
And yet its directors are appointed from within. They are not publicly elected.
They are not publicly elected.
Are you aware of any other circumstance in which unelected officials can simply impose taxes?
I am not. I believe that's why this is a unique situation crafted by the legislature. And again, it goes back to the reason why the legislature provided for the option of a nonprofit corporation to run an airport authority. It's my belief, when you look at the entire airport code as a whole, this specific provision allowed local residents, it allowed people in the community who have an interest in the airport to form a corporation and run the corporation.
Well, let's say that the authority decides that it wants a fancy new runway, and it's got to charge everyone in Yuma $10,000 assessment to pay for that. To whom do the citizens of Yuma turn if they're dissatisfied with that decision? They can't turn to the ballot box. Can they turn to the supervisors?
I suppose the only pressure that the Board of Supervisors could exert upon the Yuma County Airport Authority is lease extension. If the Airport Authority operates the airport in such a fashion that it is not a benefit to the community and it is a burden to the community.
I'm not concerned so much with that. I'm trying to figure out what kind of an entity this is, and the idea of an entity that can impose taxes but is not in any way electorally accountable is anomalous. So I'm wondering whether the legislature might have contemplated that accountability lie with the county board rather than this nonprofit corporation that seems to have all the power of a government with none of the accountability of a government.
Well, they don't have all the power of the government, Your Honor, and
Well, they have police powers, which is about the broadest, I mean, if you read that in the constitutional sense, that's about the broadest power a government can have.
Again, I can only refer back, Your Honor, to this is the statutory scheme the legislature devised and which Yuma County took advantage of. I don't have an answer specifically as to who the residents of Yuma County could go to other than the board of the Yuma County Airport Authority itself and say, we don't believe this is a fair and equitable.
Well, they can terminate the lease. Don't they have the right to an immediate termination of the lease, as I remember something in the briefs, if they choose to do so, and they can basically kick out YCAA and then go look for another entity to operate the airport authority, can't they?
That's correct. That's my reference to, again, the termination of the lease is the only pressure or power that the Yuma County Board of Supervisors has to regulate their lessee.
But you see my concern. You combine the power to tax with the police power, and you've got pretty much everything that the state of Arizona has, and yet it's just a corporation? That seems problematic. If you adhere to your view that the entity is as modestly separate from the actual government as you describe.
And I don't disagree with your characterization and the potential for that situation happening. But again, that's not a situation that Yuma County has any power over, because we're simply employing the provisions allowed by the legislature in order to have our airport authority operate our airport. I agree, though, Your Honor. I mean,
it's anomalous.
It is. But again, this is in my research, I did not find another situation similar to what the legislature has crafted for the nonprofit corporate airport authority in any other fashion, be it operating a hospital or any other type.
It makes me wonder, could the legislature write a similar statute to allow nonprofit corporations to organize cities and tax and exercise police power and then just appoint its own board in perpetuity?
I don't have an answer for that,
Fair.
Your Honor. Thank you. I don't have any further. If the court has any other questions?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kirkus relies on the Locke case and says that it's dispositive. The Locke case is a statutory scheme which specifically exempts the sponsoring entity from liability. It's in the statute. Taxing, doing something crazy, they have the right to terminate this lease and kick them out. They can do it immediately. That's not the sort of thing that you would consider would be typical of an independent company, particularly when this company was formed to do one thing, act as the instrumentality of the county to run the county's airport.
Which part wouldn't be typical of? I lost you on that.
Well, if you've got, you don't typically have in sort of a delegation of a lease, unless they're you can fire an agent at any time. You really don't need a reason to fire an agent. You can just do it under the law, even if the contracts say otherwise. Under agency law, you can say, you're no longer my agent. And so that's really the answer to the conundrums about taxing authority without any answerability. The county, as a matter of law, has that right at all times.
Are you aware of any other entity under statute that allows for the taxing and the police powers to be delegated, or by which those powers are delegated other than this circumstance?
No, it's very strange, I admit. And the only way to reconcile that is to say, well, this is the agent of the county. And so the county is answerable for what its agent does, and it can either take immediate action to terminate that agency, or the people in general can say, we don't like this $10,000 per capita assessment because somebody at the airport wants a bigger building.
If that's the only way we can see it, then show me another example in county government where an agent of the county has the ability to tax and exercise police power.
There aren't. I know of none. I can't say that there aren't. but I don't know of any.
Do you agree that the composition of the board is as we discussed with your colleague? That it's self-perpetuating, self-appointing?
Yeah, these guys elect each other.
Okay, so what if they all die? What if there's a plague and they all die? Who appoints the next members?
Well, the entity ceases to exist then, and everything reverts back to the county.
The entity isn't the directors. The entity is the entity. The directors merely hold offices.
The entity in terms of operation is no longer existing, can't operate, can't function, and therefore everything under the agreement with this entity reverts back to the county, and that agreement terminates.
There would be no mechanism for somebody to go into court, a petitioner, an interested party, somebody interested in the airport, to go in and ask the court in Superior Court to say, look, all the people died. We need an order to run this corporation. Wouldn't that be within the equitable power?
Couldn't I go in and say, I'm really interested in airport operations. I'd like to apply to be a director?
I don't think you could do that without the consent of the principal, the owner of the airport, if we no longer have any of those people. I just don't think
But you're sort of drawing this from logic. You're not pointing, or you can't think of anything in the charter, the lease, or anything that compels this result.
No, I can't.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think logically here. What do I do with this sort of anomalous situation, which is irreconcilable unless you say, yeah, this is a principal-agent relationship is what it is. Then everything makes sense. What else can I say?
Is the organic document in the record?
Yes, it is. This organic document is in the record. You're talking about the original lease?
No, I'm actually talking about and pardon me if I use the wrong word, but the charter, if you will.
The corporate document for
Yes, the document that establishes
the Yuma County Airport Authority. I'm not
The
sure.
Articles of Incorporation?
It is Articles of Incorporation. I actually have a copy right here. I do not know if that is a part of the record or not. I think the court may judicially note it because it is recorded with the Secretary of State here. And if the court would like, I do have a copy of it.
You don't need to hand it to us now.
I understand.
just curious.
I will leave it with your clerk, and you can look at it. I'll show Mr. Kirkus. We have, there's no objection or any issues regarding the validity of the foundation document.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Is the bottom line answer to the question that was asked that if the YCAA is having their meeting at the airport and they've got all of their officers present and an airplane misses the strip and hits the building, the county isn't in a position to do anything in regard to the corporation, is it?
Yes.
It can step in and take over the corporation, or it can simply administer the affairs of the property that it owns.
It can seek indemnity from them, and if they don't have the financial resources to cover that, then the entity goes out of business, and the airport is then responsible.
Well, let's say they're flush financially and they're running a great operation, but there's this tragic accident. And you simply have individuals who hold positions who are no longer with us. The entity is doing great. Under the Articles of Incorporation or whatever bylaws may exist, how do those people get replaced?
So that they're all gone?
If they're all gone, but the entity itself has been going great, running a fantastic business, there are no problems, there's just a tragic accident. How do we find new people to fill those positions?
There is no mechanism to do that. It's as though you and I happen to be individuals and we're dead. We're gone. It's our heirs and devisees, or if we are an agent of someone, then the
But
principal.
if I die, there's a method to fill my position here.
Yes.
And that's true of every public official, and I believe it's true of every corporation. In a corporation, the shareholders would elect directors.
The only instance where that is not true is where someone is somebody else's agent. there is almost never a mechanism to replace that principal's agent because it is the principal who decides that.
Well, thank you. We're out of time. I appreciate both counsel's arguments, and we will take this matter under advisement. We'll issue a written decision in due course and stand in recess to allow our next case to set up. Thank you.